Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Podcana episode 22. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined by Kawa to talk about the biggest weekend in competitive Lorcana to date. We had the Miami PPG tournament that was over 250 players, as well as an invitational from TCG Player that only had 16 players, but did sport some of the best card game players in the world, including, Magic, current reigning Magic World Champion, I believe, Nathan Stoyer, Frank Carson's in the picture. I'm just looking at it now. And yeah, a lot of data coming out of this, especially the TCG Player, smaller sample size, but I would say the deck that won, very interesting, very atypical deck. I haven't seen anything like it up until now. And Miami, 250 plus players. I mean, that's the real test, right? We got to see what the metagame would actually look like at a real competitive event. Not that the other events haven't been real, but in terms of size. So we got to see a nice metagame pie and then see how that translated to top 8 and ultimately what deck won. And I don't think it was too much of a surprise. There's a lot of, Team Ruby Amethyst, Team Wheel Steel, but one did eventually win out. We'll dive into that. Kawa, anything to say about the weekend? I know you were at TwitchCon. I was casting a Flesh and Blood tournament, a big Flesh and Blood tournament here in Dallas. So a little bit of a break from Lorcana for us on the weekend. I wanted to actually compete in Miami, but wasn't able to because I had the casting gig. My friend Sasha almost went, but wasn't able to go. What were you up to? How was TwitchCon for you, Kawa?
Yeah, TwitchCon was sick. I was actually very much the same. I was such a bummer that it was that exact weekend because I would have loved to have competed, to meet up with you and Sasha and just like hang out, play some Lorcana. But no, TwitchCon was really cool. I got to try out the new Star Wars TCG game, Star Wars Unlimited. So that was actually pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bit of a game demo there. We got some promo cards. But I still played some Lorcana. Myself and my partner, we played loads of it just to pass the time. We had a 9-hour layover in LAX. So we said, right, let's just jam some games. So yeah, it was nice. I wasn't like hyper focused on it, but it was nice to kind of step back and play the game to kind of pass the time. And we found some cool decks and had a good time. But
yeah,
how was Dallas?
It was fun. I mean, I've done quite a few of these Flesh and Blood tournaments. We have the World Championships here in Barcelona in like 2 to 3 weeks, so it's cool leading up to that event. Ultimately, a good weekend, but I don't. Have you been to like a card game, like a big card game multi-day tournament before?
Not a huge one.
Okay,
no, I
yeah, it's interesting. So they're pretty high speed. They tend to last 12 to 15 hours. I'm sure Miami was similar. So you get this sort of like post-event depression after because you just go. Like
you're just going, yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. The amount of socialization you get is just overwhelming. So like the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday is just like, what is real life? So yeah, I'm definitely still got a case of that. But yeah, Flesh and Blood, kind of par for the course. Been doing that for a few years, and it was overall pretty good. I want to tangent slightly before we talk about Lorcana. So, because I want to ask you about Star Wars, because I had a few friends go to TwitchCon as well, and they talked to me about Star Wars. So Star Wars sounds cool to me because it's an I go, you go kind of game. Similar to sort of like Runeterra a bit, not with the resource banking, but my turn, your turn, my turn, your turn. Really quick, action. I've actually heard overwhelmingly like lukewarm and negative things. That being said, you are playing starter decks. They are starter decks. And if I played starter deck, Lorcana's my favorite TCG right now. And if you asked me my opinion of Lorcana after I played starter decks, I would have told you it was a hot pile of garbage. But that wasn't the entire story. It ended up being fantastic. So what was your opinion? Because I know you're definitely biased towards saying the game is good because you're a bit of a Star Wars fan. What were your thoughts on the game?
Honestly, I found it to be interesting, but I first of all, I don't think there was any actual staff there showing us how to play, which was a big bummer because like as a card gamer, I want to know as many interactions as possible. Like I want to ask questions during a demo, right? And these people didn't really have the answer for very basic things that I asked. And then, I mean, for the most part, yeah, the game was really interesting. The initiative, like token or system was kind of interesting, but again, like that wasn't properly explained to us. So like, that's the one thing I hate is when you go into a new card game, right? I want to know all the rules. I want to know, okay, what this does, what that does. And a lot of the demos I've been to, it was the same for Lorcana when I went to Gamescom. Like they try and shorten it down because they've got a lot of people that want to play the game, right? So for example, Lorcana, it's like, oh, we'll just quest to 10 or whatever. But in this game, they were like, oh yeah, this like certain keyword or interaction, just forget about it. I'm like, wait, what? So the best example I can give is, again, this is a huge tangent, but like, there was a certain 3-cost card. I think it was a 3-cost card that had 2 attack and 1 health, right? And it read something like give another friendly unit 2 experience points. I'm like, okay, what are experience points? And they're like, yeah, you don't need to worry about that. I'm like, but the card is clearly understated. I'm like, I'm not just going to play a 3-2 or a 3 cost 2-1 just because, right? So I want to know, like, that bummed me out a little bit, but for the most part, it was really interesting. I do like the whole kind of leader interaction where you've got like your kind of your main hero, your leader, and you can flip it into play. That's kind of cool. But I would need to play the game a little bit more. And, you know, all I'll say is I'm glad that the game's not coming out till March, because I will need a good more amount of time to kind of really get my judgment on the game. So if you ask me straight up what was my first impression, I thought it was okay, but it's honestly, for me at least, it's nothing to write home about. But maybe I need to try the game a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm super keen to see that system in action in a paper TCG. It's probably existed before, but it's just not in any major TCG that exists right now. What's funny is like I really like Lorcana right now, but Lorcana is very asymmetric in the sense that like I take my turn, you sit there, do absolutely nothing theoretically, right? You should be thinking about your turn, considering the play lines I can take, etc. But you actually have no game actions and no agency on my turn. But Lorcana is still quick. You know, it's generally pretty quick, and there's not too many game actions that a singular player can take. Well, if you look at something like Pokemon TCG, which I haven't played a lot, I've only looked at from afar. Pokemon is like Lorcana, but, you know, zoomed in 2,000 years in the future, which is like they take like 100 game actions, and it's like 15 minutes for a turn, and they're like drawing, searching their deck, etc. And you do have to sit there for a while. So I wonder if Lorcana will get towards that, where there's like too many game actions being taken, you have to wait too long. Because like right now, if outside of my game experience, if you asked me what I thought about my turn, your turn kind of systems where you just have to wait, I would say they were bad, but for some reason it feels okay in Lorcana. And I've always felt engaged playing the game.
I prefer that system personally. I like the I go, you go. Maybe that's for me playing so much Hearthstone, right? That there wasn't like
let's clarify too. I go, you go. So there's I go, you go in Lorcana, which is your turn, my turn, and then there's also Star Wars, which is I take one action, you take one action. So that,
yes.
Which one do you prefer?
I think I prefer the turns over the actions, honestly. But it's interesting, right? Like it's just, but I would naturally say that because that's the thing that I'm probably the most used to, if that makes sense, right? Like I want to explore the one action per turn. And when we were doing it, it made things really interesting because it was like, okay, I can kind of attack this, but that's all I can do, and I have to play a card. Like it definitely like elevates a game and takes it to in a different direction. But naturally, I like what I'm comfortable with, if that makes sense. But always open to exploring new stuff.
All right, well, let's talk about Miami. So I did have the numbers slightly wrong. It's actually 237 players. Looks like they registered deck lists. I know 264 plus signed up, but a lot of people, either won't attend on the day or, something like that. It happens in every single tournament. So 237 total. Let's look at that day one metagame breakdown, which is fascinating. So we had a clean split on the top two decks. So Amber Steel, Ruby Amethyst, both representing 28% of the metagame. By the way, for everything we talk about in this episode, there will be links in the description for the article on Mushi Report for Miami, as well as the TCG Player Invitation. You can find graphics, deck lists, all that stuff, etc. But yeah, Amber Steel, Ruby Amethyst, by far the most represented decks at 67 for Amber Steel, 66 for Ruby Amethyst, both representing 28% of that metagame. And then in number 3 comes in Emerald Amethyst, with 24 players at 10%. So pretty big drop off. We see it's that third deck. And then we go down into sort of everything else at like 5% or less, which, the next deck is technically Amber Sapphire, but interchangeable with anything. We see like 10 players on that, and others representing 17% of the metagame, which is actually kind of a lot, to be honest. So 39 players on not these sort of first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 archetypes, which that's actually really interesting. So a lot of people sort of showed up with their own little brews, it looks like, with less popular combinations. But we did see Amber Steel, Ruby Amethyst, because the biggest question about this game, not the biggest question, but a narrative that we had sort of been coming back to, was that if you look at the data from Pixelborn, it was very, very 50-50, standard deviation of 1 on win rates, and everything looked to be super balanced. But the idea was that if you went into a higher level tournament like this with this many players, that you would see a clear cut in the metagame. And the decks that we thought would make it to the top ended up doing so, with Amber Steel, most likely the Wheel Steel list being the most popular list here, and Ruby Amethyst making it to the top there. So very interesting. I would not have been surprised if in this metagame the third deck was also quite popular. So it ended up being Emerald Amethyst, but honestly, could have been anything. Could have been Amber Sapphire. anything like that. But looks like the two best decks in the metagame right now are Amber Steel, Ruby Amethyst, both represented on day one in the metagame breakdown and in top 8, which we'll get to. So they actually performed as well. Well, so let's talk about first place, Kawa. First place of this tournament is Wheel Steel. This is a pretty standard Wheel Steel list. Pretty standard, to be honest. The first place player is Jose F. I don't know if I could pronounce that last name. If I did, I'd probably do it a disservice. And yeah, like I said, links will be in the descriptions, but this is stock standard. I mean, this is exactly what I've seen at my locals, people playing pretty much this exact 60 cards. And I'm not surprised. The power level is there. Wheel Steel is there. I think that Amber Steel got a bad rap after it was first popularized as a mid-range deck, and then I think that people were kind of huffing some copium on that mid-range deck's ability to beat Ruby Amethyst and its ability to, I don't know, have agency in the mirror, et cetera, et cetera. But then we saw the new innovation with Wheel Steel, which is Wheel Steel, for people who don't know, is effectively trying to play Whole New World on turn 3. So your best draws are basically Captain Hook, turn 1, turn 2, you play Lantern, and turn 3, you try to get as many cards out of your hand, ink them, play another 1-drop if you can, if you have the resources for it. Then you're going to shift Captain Hook onto Hook, sing Whole New World on turn 3. You will draw effectively 6 to 7 cards. Your opponent will probably draw, because of how many they're discarding, 2. They'll probably draw 2 cards. They'll probably have 5 cards in hand, probably net 2 cards. Kawa, you said this was your bet to win the tournament, and I think it was a pretty safe bet. Looking towards Miami, there was basically, in my opinion, 2 decks to pick from, and I would have sided on the more proactive one if I was a betting man. But what are your impressions after seeing this actually take down the entire thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does exactly what it wants it to do. I'm curious to say, so you're saying this is pretty much the stock list. I could be wrong, but I don't remember seeing as little, so few Captain Hooks opposed to so many aerials. Now, I actually like this change. I think having more aerials in this deck is just more consistent, right? Because you should be drawing into your songs and getting those cards more consistently. I also like it because it means that on turn 4, potentially, you can sing Whole New World rather than the whole idea of trying to get your Captain Hook, shifting into it and singing it. It's great, but how often it works compared to something like Aerial, it does not work as often. So
it's definitely
I like this version. Yeah, I like this version a lot.
I think that this version actually is probably the most standard version of it. This is the version I literally have sleeved up on my kitchen table. Maybe not the exact breakdown of 3 Rapunzel, 2 Fire the Cannons, but yeah, definitely 2 Captain Hook. So the reason is Captain Hook is actually a pretty bad card, but it gives you that equity to do the turn 3 Whole New World. That's how you do turn 3 Whole New World, is the Captain Hook. But if this deck has to turn 4 Whole New World, or Whole New World off of Stitch Carefree Surfer, or Whole New World off of Ariel, it's not the high roll, but it's totally serviceable. And Captain Hook, Captain Hook is in there for pretty much that reason. I see this list, opted to keep in the Beast to have some sort of item destruction. I've saw some lists cut that out. Fire the Cannons to give it a better matchup in the aggro, and then everything is very, very stock standard. So congratulations to Jose. It's a huge win. This is the first big tournament in Lorcana.
Oh, was it again 2 cases or something like that? My man's got
I don't even know. Honestly, I remember it being product based, and it's funny because product based is usually very underwhelming for a tournament prize support, but in a game like Lorcana, it's it's actually so valuable.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm interested to see, as we probably won't have any more tournaments until set 2 is fully spoiled and comes out and is probably live on Pixelborn, people testing it. But looking back, I guess in the history books, Wheel Steel here will go down in history as the best deck in the format. I think it beats out Ruby Amethyst. This deck, by the way, Wheel Steel or Amber Steel, Whole New World, this deck does have a good matchup into Ruby Amethyst. It's a bit play draw. I think Ruby Amethyst has a lot more equity on play, and this thing can blow out Ruby Amethyst because of turn 3 Whole New World with Captain Hook on if it is on the play. But that being said, in terms of decks in the metagame that have decent matchups across the field and can actually beat Ruby Amethyst, this is definitely one of them. And I think that's why we see it rise to the top here.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
So within the rest of top 8, we have, if if I'm not mistaken. I think there was only 2 Ruby Amethysts that made it to top 8. A lot of Wheel Steel. I think if I'm just counting here, 1, 2, 3, 4,
It's
5
4.
maybe.
It's 4. So
It's 4,
you're
yeah.
looking at top 16 because it's kind of written. The article's written in an interesting way. But yeah, we actually had 4 Wheel Steel, 2 Ruby Amethyst. If we're gonna break it down archetypically, 4 Wheel Steel, 2 Ruby Amethyst, 1 Steel Emerald. I remember my color names, and then 1 Sapphire Emerald as well in top 8. Yeah, so let's talk about the Ruby Amethyst, because Ruby Amethyst is a deck where it got second place. The deck building decisions, the community definitely has different ideas of how to build this deck. I would say this deck is, you have a lot more. It's a lot more controversial, and there's a lot more deck building expression player to player than there is something in like Wheel Steel. Ruby Amethyst, this is Gabriel Torres. They won with a sort of more traditional list. I wish that this showed the actual number of cards here, because I can't really count it up on the fly.
Yeah.
But I will say they do have the Magic Broom, so 4 Magic Broom, that's critical. 2 Small Aladdin, so 2 shiftable Aladdin. 2 Jetsam, 2 Goofy, does have access to Queen. Other than that, this is a very, very standard list. One thing I will say, also is Mickey Mouse. So it has that ability to kind of infinite loop. It doesn't have Befuddle, so in order to infinite loop itself, it needs to probably kill some Magic Brooms in the end game. But be prepared or something like that. I digress. It does not have access to Cauldron, though. Sorry
to interrupt you. It is a 60 card. I just did some counting while... Yeah, it is 60.
That was quick maths right there. No Cauldron. No Cauldron. So 2
really
Pocket Watch, 2 Magic Mirror, and 1 Shield of Virtue. Very interesting.
And if you look down at the other one that made top 8, it's a little bit more sprawled out. It's actually not in like the Dreamborn format, but I can see 2 Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailors. I can see Jafar. I can see I guess the rest of it's actually pretty standard. But yeah, like those are 2 cards that I really did not think. I know you experimented with Jafar early on in the list and you quickly subbed it out, but the Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor, like, I'm surprised to see that actually made it into a list.
Maybe it was a meta call. So this is Milton. Interesting. Yeah, one of the locals I play at is called Milton's Games. Anyway, yeah, this is a Ruby Amethyst evasive list, almost card for card. It does have the addition of Jafar and 2 Queens, so it has.
Oh, sorry, it's Jerry. Just to confirm, it's Jerry Bishop, not Milton.
Oh, it is. Okay, it's written like that. Got it. I didn't know if it was top or bottom, but yeah. So it has. This is Ruby Amethyst evasives. Pretty much card for card the list that we posted on this channel, except that it has access to 2 Queen, 3 Jafar, and then 2 Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor at the top end, which I could see being so the reason why I'm not a fan of Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor is it gives your opponent the ability to trade up. So if your opponent Dragon fires a Goofy or a Pongo, they trade down effectively because you're using a 5-cost uninkable to kill that. You're just giving them better value on clearing. But that being said, if a lot of people are playing Ruby Amethyst evasives, if you land Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor, it will trade with trade with every evasive character in the game. Like it will 2-for-1 them if you're actually doing creature combat. So it could be a meta call. I mean, this is, other than that, it is absolutely an evasive list with 3 Pongo, 3 Goofy, and 2 Mickey Mouse Brave Little Tailor. It just doesn't have access to Jetsam. Other than that, pretty standard. Jafar's interesting. Yeah. Queen is a card that I'm definitely not a fan of, and I would like to hear the thesis on it, because it has an ability that I would love to resolve multiple times, but it just never really happens. And then Jafar's a big butt that quests for 2. I would say this list also, it does have the 3 Gaston, but and 2 Rafiki. So it does seem like the early game is a little bit soft to aggro and Emerald. Moyne and I were talking a lot about, do we actually need the little Aladdin? Should we have little else in? Like, because honestly, it feels like the worst matchup for this deck is Emerald decks, very aggressive Emerald decks, Emerald Sapphire. Maybe, and then obviously Wheel Steel if they high roll you on turn 3. But if outside of that, yeah, pretty powerful. Let's talk about the non-Ruby Amethyst, non-Wheel Steel decks, because let me just verify real quick. Yeah, it does look like every Amber Steel deck that made it in is a Wheel Steel deck. So they all have access to a whole new world. They all have for the most part, they'll have access to the Captain Hooks that they can shift. They are a bit different in build. Some have access to more target removal in the form of Smash. Some have access to a lower curve in terms of the uninkable Lilo, the quest for 2 that you can play for 1. Other than that, they are definitely all wheel steel decks. So that is the deck. If you are still playing mid-range, the old mid-range version of Amber Steel, I think that you are...
Change it up.
Yeah, you are a couple weeks behind. So maybe not the deck to play.
Oh, wow. Raven will be very happy to see this Emerald Steel list.
Yeah, so you're more familiar with Raven's list than I am, probably off the top of your head. How does this compare to the list that he was playing? Was he playing Mickey Mouse, the Musketeer?
Quite different. So there's no Mickey Mouse Musketeer. There was a Genie in the original build, but he took the Genie out. No Hercules either. So it seems like it's kind of an interesting idea that you want to protect your high questing cards behind like a few bodyguard targets. I know there was a Tink again. He did sub the Tinkerbell out, but I think the general idea is kind of the same here. I think just the only difference being is you have a few bodyguard cards that can protect your cards that quest for a lot, like your Hatter, your Cusco. I think Genie is actually like such a good card. But again, it also like anytime I face Genie in a tournament setting, it messed me up because of the actual matchup I was facing. I think. Especially okay, like think of Genie against Ruby Amethyst, and if you don't have your removal and you just have like your Pongo and your Goofy, like it just absolutely wrecks it. It just absolutely destroys it, right? And it bounces something back. So I found that really good because the idea of Genie is it's that card that okay, I'm just gonna be questing. I play Genie to delay you even more to allow me to quest and just essentially win the game, right? It just keeps your opponent from being able to get rid of your cards essentially. But yeah, I'm really impressed with this list. How do you feel about the bodyguards? And the Aladdin as well. The Aladdin's an interesting pick.
I just want to say for people listening, this is Roger Para. This is a Emerald Steel list, just to clarify. And yeah, it does. I mean, looking from a high level, it looks to be an aggro deck, a very aggressive deck. I mean, has a very low curve that has access to bodyguards to sort of try to defend those higher quest characters, which is honestly most of them. I mean, it's playing the Steel Aladdin, the 2-cost 2/1 that quest for 2. How do I feel about the bodyguards? Honestly, this is a list that I have not played much or actually played against at all. I played against it on Pixelborn, of course, but it felt pretty soft to Ruby Amethyst Evasives. Any Emerald deck it has a decent matchup into Ruby Amethyst, I think, because of because of Cusco, just such a powerful card. And yeah, but I will say that these evasive characters in the form of Tinkerbell and Genie, they were a lot better versus older versions of Ruby Amethyst than the sort of the more modern ones, because the more modern ones just can inherently do combat with it. Was Raven playing Whole New World?
Yes, he was.
Okay, so 3 Whole New World. Yeah, I mean, it looks like a pretty stock. I'm less interested in how this deck plays into Ruby Amethyst, because any hyper aggressive deck that quests for a lot and is effectively Emerald is going to be decent into Ruby Amethyst. I'm more interested in how this does in the aggro mirror, because the second most represented deck was actually the probably one of the worst converting decks in the form of Emerald Amethyst. So it was the third most played deck and put no players in top 8, which is something to note, by the way, because I know a lot of people are high on that deck. Looks like it is probably doesn't have too much space in the metagame against a metagame dominated by control decks, Ruby Amethyst, and a metagame dominated by what looks to be just a more powerful aggro deck in the form of Wheel Steel. So important to note. But yeah, I don't have too much to say on this Kawa. It's an archetype that I haven't played too much. I put one player into top 8. I'm less interested on how good it is into Ruby Amethyst and more on how good its matchup spread is into a larger metagame, right?
For sure, yeah. I'd be really interested to see how it fares, because like as that Tinkerbell, it has the smash and stuff, but like even in like against Emerald Amethyst, I'd be really curious to see how this deck fares. Yeah, but, I mean, it just looks like a solid deck. It looks like it does good stuff, pretty much. Like it looks like it can get there, and clearly it got there for Roger. You know, getting top 8 in a tournament like this with a deck that is, I would say, like, I mean, I would call this an off-meta deck. Like, it's a fine deck, but I'd still call it off-meta because it's not one of the top ones, right? Like, if I was Roger, I'd be very happy.
Yeah, and
for sure.
I just noticed that we got the first player. Sorry, the article is just written in a very bizarre way in terms of like where it actually has the deck lists and player names. But the first place player was Wheel Steel, like we said, but it wasn't
Yep.
Gabriel Torres. It was no, it was Jose. So
No,
we
you
had
said Jose. You said
Yeah.
Jose. Yeah.
One thing I didn't point out that Jose has access to is 3 Hades. So Hades is a very, very good card against Ruby Amethyst. This deck has so much, like, such an ability to go under the Ruby Amethyst matchup, but then if it has access to Hades, it has it has a bit of inevitability in the end game because Ruby Amethyst can't do anything against the Hades loop. So that doesn't. It's cool to see that actually win out because that is good tech, I think, for the field. If you can put those cards into your deck and still win the mirror and still win against aggro decks, you're in a great spot because Ruby Amethyst really has a hard time beating that card specifically. All right, last deck here. This isn't a top 8 deck. This is top 16, but I'm assuming it's it's ninth. I don't know if they have it in any order here, but this is just a deck we talked a lot about, which is Emerald Sapphire. Deck is very, very good into Ruby Amethyst. It's very effective. This is actually a pretty interesting list. There is no Eye of the Fates. It doesn't have access to a lot of ramp. But ultimately, if you thought that the metagame was going to be dominated by Ruby Amethyst, this would probably have been a good pick. That being said, the metagame was dominated equally by Ruby Amethyst and Steel Amber, and I'm assuming that this does not have a great matchup into Wheel Steel or Steel Amber because they have access to a lot of removal in the form of Grab Your Swords, Fire the Cannon, Smash, etc., and they have way better draw engines than you. But yeah, this is a decent aggro deck. I want to ask you, Kawa. I think probably the biggest question asked is that it's funny because the narrative is definitely Ruby Amethyst, Wheel Steel or Amber Steel, but the third most played deck, Emerald Amethyst, 24 players, 10%, but no players into top 8. How do you feel about that list specifically? Is it potentially overrated? I'm trying to see if they put anybody in top. They put nobody in top 16.
No, nobody in top 16 there.
Wow, that's a pretty terrible showing, to be honest. So talk to me about why that happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I've faced that matchup a little bit in tournaments, and like you said, I feel like if there was that much Wheel Steel, I think that deck just absolutely shits on Emerald Amethyst. If I'm being honest, with all of the removal tools that is available to it, like the Grab Your Swords, the Tinks, the Smashes and stuff like that, I think it just gets there. And I mean, at the end of the day, it is a control deck, right? Like your only major
I think it's
problem
an aggro
is
deck, actually. Emerald Amethyst. I think it's an aggro deck that has access to card draw. At least that's how I saw it pitched.
Emerald Amethyst.
Yeah.
You mean Amber Steel?
No, green, purple, purple.
No, that's what I'm saying. No, I know it's not aggro deck. I'm saying that I think Amber Steel is more like it has controlling elements, right? Of being able to control the board and stuff like that with your Tinks, your Grab Your Swords and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think what makes it super good is like I feel like your only problem is maybe a Cusco, but by the time they get to their Cusco, I think you've done so much by playing Wheel Steel, by developing. You do 1 into 2 into your aerial. Once you kind of get your aerial engine going, and you have a few smashes or whatever, I feel like you kind of just get there, right? The whole idea of Emerald Amethyst is you just quest, and if you can't get there on time, you can't win, right? So if they start clearing your board, I think it's just over. That's my
I would push back on one thing. I think that the whole idea of Emerald is that you quest, but the idea of adding Amethyst in is that you are an aggro deck that has access to card draw, but card draw sucks against. Card draw is not good against a deck that can cast Whole New World on turn 3. It's not. Because the more cards you draw, the more equity your opponent has to play Whole New World, and they get card advantage off that card, and you don't. So, Emerald Amethyst is kind of one of the worst combinations you could possibly have. It seems like, at least from a archetype standpoint, into something like Wheel Steel, because the card draw, which is the whole reason you're playing Amethyst, doesn't actually help you. And Emerald is just a color that is inherently soft to AOE board removal, right? And just like targeted board removal at that, especially if it comes cheap. So. Yeah,
is that why you think? These few Amber Sapphire and even the one Emerald Sapphire deck that we saw here? Do you think that's why they probably made it into top 8 and top 16 because they fare better as a cooler combination to Emerald, right? Like, is Sapphire better than Amethyst in that situation because you tend to be ramping? So even if you do get a big hand, you can start playing big threats.
So what I think happens is it's less about its matchup into Wheel Steel. But if you're looking for an aggro deck to play into Ruby Amethyst, for some reason there has been a narrative that Emerald Amethyst is like a good aggro deck into, and I just don't think so. I think that Ruby Amethyst is just a very, very powerful deck, and the only way you can beat that deck is by doing inherently unfair things. Like something that is very unfair in Lorcana is turn 3 Whole New World, Stitch Rockstar, draw half your deck. Like that is those are the kind of things you have to do to beat Ruby Amethyst. There is an outlier, and the outlier is Emerald Sapphire, and the reason it's an outlier is because those two colors are just like built to counter most of Ruby Amethyst. They have ward on them. They quest for a crap load. You have access to, not in this list, but a lot of times Eye of the Fates. Like that, those things are hard for Ruby Amethyst to deal with. And that color combination, while good into Ruby Amethyst, is an outlier because it can be pretty soft to the rest of the field. So it's like you're very much committing to trying to beat Ruby Amethyst when you play something like an Emerald Sapphire. That being said, like I don't think that Amethyst Emerald is a better aggro deck in the Ruby Amethyst. Like there's almost no reason to have the access to the Amethyst part, right? The Emerald is the powerful part of your deck, and if you're trying to compete on card advantage and card quality, especially as we go into the mid to late game against Ruby Amethyst, it's just not where you want to be. I think that maybe in the aggro mirror, maybe in like the old school sort of aggro versus mid-range, Amber Steel, or just aggro mirrors, whatever color you want, having access to the card draw could be helpful. But ultimately, the fundamentals, the card draw is bad versus Wheel Steel, bad versus, it's just not very helpful against a deck that's playing Whole New World. And by adding Amethyst into your deck, maybe you're just not fast enough to beat Ruby Amethyst. And if Ruby Amethyst gets to turn 6, turn 7, 7 ink, they will just absolutely destroy you on card quality. They're the best cards in the game. So that's sort of my theory. But interesting to see that we had a deck, the third most played deck, have such a bad showing overall.
For sure. Before we move on to talking about the announced like update for competitive play and OP and stuff like that, I want to just draw your attention, Brendan, to the very last deck of this article, and it is a Amber Sapphire deck, and it has both. Well, I mainly want to say it's pretty cool. My guy has 4 enchanted Surfer Stitches, which is insane. But I know you talked a little bit earlier, or I think you might have just mentioned to me, the whole idea of Maximus in these Amber decks. What are your thoughts on both the Bodyguard Maximus, and I know we already touched on the smaller Max because it's actually quite good for Rapunzel and stuff like that.
Yeah, the Bodyguard Maximus, I had never seen it in Amber Sapphire until this weekend. So we're about to hop over to the TCG Player Invitational, and spoilers, Amber Sapphire actually won that tournament. It put, I think it was two decks in top 4 as well. So yeah, performed very well there. That was an invitational, so 16 players, obviously smaller field. But what are my thoughts on Maximus Bodyguard? It's interesting because the idea about this is you're playing it before it's a 5 cost, right? Before turn 5, so you're playing it on turn 4 by playing Mickey Mouse. And yeah, I guess I'm assuming that's more of like an anti-aggro thing. I'd be surprised if Maximus is like a anti-control card because it gets cleared by Rafiki, right? It gets 2 for 1 on Rafiki on board. But maybe just the reason that card's in the deck is to give this deck more of a chance against some of those hyper-aggressive decks or those Wheel Steel decks. I'm assuming, my biggest question is, does Amber Sapphire have a good matchup into Wheel Steel? I would say no. I don't think so.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because as we move over to this TCG Player Tournament, we can see that Amber Sapphire won the tournament, and in the second place we have a Wheel Steel deck. So yeah, I'd be very curious to see how that matchup goes, honestly. I mean, I think it's a little bit better in terms of like once they do their Whole New World, if it's not, I mean, listen, if it's on the turn 3 thing, then it's just like, well, they've done their combo. That's like the best start they can have. But generally, if you can get a few of your ramp cards down, like your Mickey Mouse and your Chromatalos and stuff like that, it's probably not as bad. I'm also a big fan of the Mr. Shmee. I love that card in Amber Sapphire. I think it just works really well with Rapunzel and stuff like that. Just having a 2/5 for 3, I think, is super good. But the one jump ahead, I haven't seen that card in many Amber Sapphires at all. So yeah, it's a very interesting list that we see. Yeah, this is from Harlan.
Yeah, so we're hopping over the TCG Player Invitational now. So Harlan Fire, I think that's how you say their last name. won the entire tournament, and I would say this is the most innovative list out of the weekend. This is the most atypical list out of the entire weekend. I've not seen a Amber Sapphire list that both runs 4 Rapunzels as well as 2 Maximus bodyguards with the 3 Mr. Smees. Like you said, One Jump Ahead is a card that I've seen in these lists. I've seen it played. The list that I played against the most actually had it in the deck, but having access to it has 2 Stitch Rockstar as well. That's extreme. I've never seen that card in this list. It's always been Stitch Carefree Surfer as the top end, but because it has access to 4 Grammatala, 4 Stitch, maybe that's just enough. It also has the anti-control package in case a entire 4 copies of Hades, the recursive Hades. That's a lot. I usually only see 3, but the biggest callouts for me are 4 Bell and 4 Maximus. Bell is a card that, we saw in a lot of Sapphire decks initially, but starting to make its way out because those Sapphire ramp strategies, or at least the Sapphire Steel ones, were not so good. And people were opting to cut Bell to go for a more mid-rangey, sort of actually try to compete on board kind of deck. Because Bell, obviously once you're at 10 ink quest for 5, and it can be this win condition. But I think that this deck initially was struggling to sort of maintain parity on board, compete in creature combat, etc. But if we're looking at retrospective on the weekend, what is the biggest shakeup to the meta? I think everything we expected except this list. When I was shown this list for the first time, I was actually very surprised that this was the winner of the tournament. This is definitely pretty innovative. This is a new list.
Yeah, definitely. As we can see, I believe, this is so Mason Clark, who was in, I believe, got 3rd place. Very few differences between the 1st place list and the 3rd place list. I think, as far as I'm aware, there's just no Maximus bodyguards. There's probably just more copies of the other cards within the deck. Yeah,
I assume these players tested together, to be honest. I believe they're both Magic players. I mean, a lot of players in this tournament were Magic players. I could be wrong, but you can see card choices that look like they tested together. Like the 2 Stitch Carefree Surfer, 3 One Jump Ahead. There's a lot of parity in terms of the actual card numbers, like 4 Hades. I would be surprised if these players, tested completely independently of each other. I'm assuming that the Maximus is the same reason for hitting Maximus in the last list, which is just to give you more equity versus aggro and protect your Bell. Let's talk about the other list that made it into the top 4 here. So both were Wheel Steel. So no Ruby Amethyst making it into the top 4 of the TCG Player Invitational. And both Amber Steel lists were Wheel Steel decks. And they are actually mirror lists, almost. I'm just
no Lantern in the in Frank's list.
That's very interesting that Frank Karsten.
Oh, sorry, no, there is a Lantern.
Yeah, I was gonna say Frank Karsten opting to take out the Mana Rock would be interesting. So Lantern is an interesting card because he only has 1. There's been cards that have been created like that in Magic, and they were very, very powerful, very, very powerful. And I think that they have been printed for a while. But yeah, Don DeLoisier and Frank Karsten both making the top 4 with Wheel Steel, adding that 1 Maximus in as well. But the lists are not exactly the same, but they're pretty similar, and they're actually very similar to the list that we saw in the PPG Miami. So
yep,
I would say my big takeaway when we were talking about from this weekend is these Amber Sapphire lists. They're innovative. They're new. I would definitely give them a try. If you're looking for a new deck to pick up after the weekend, after the results of the weekend, and you want to make a results-based decision, definitely give a shot. Give this Amber Sapphire deck a shot. And I think right now we can sort of close the book on Chapter 1, and Wheel Steel was the best deck.
Yep.
Would you agree with that?
I have to agree there. I would 100% agree. I think it was a very close ride. And it's so funny, right? We talked about how well, how balanced the game was all throughout Chapter 1, right? And it was pretty much like, is it Amber Steel? Is it Ruby Amethyst? Is it Amber Steel? Is it Ruby Amethyst? And I think from Miami, we can see that it was very clear cut in terms of what do we say? Both were 28%. But yeah, I do have to agree. I think that Wheel Steel just edges it out. If you're saying what is the best list right now, I think it is Wheel Steel.
So the reason why I like Amber Steel and then the newest iteration of it is that we saw Amber Steel be the most popular deck at one point, not playing Whole New World. But it was this mid-range deck. It was very good at combat, very good at clearing things. It was decent at card advantage, right? It played all the aerials, etc. It was like playing cards that replace themselves. It was being very fair. This deck is the antithesis of fair. This deck says, what is the most busted thing that Steel can do? Or what's the most busted thing you can do in Lorcana? Whole New World. Whole New World is by far the most broken card. If you're looking at we're gonna look. If you're looking at the next year of Lorcana, what card is the most likely to be banned? 1,002,000,000%. It's Whole New World. I would be surprised if Whole New World makes it 12 months in this game, especially once competitive comes out. It's not broken yet. It's just very powerful. But by far, I mean, this card is a absolute mirror. It is a carbon copy of a card that has existed in Magic the Gathering. It costs a little bit more, like 5 is more expensive because Wheel of Fortune costs 3. But you're casting it on turn 3 for free. That is broken. So I think that these people looked at the metagame, they looked at Steel, and they said, they looked at Lorcana, what is the most broken card? All right, how do we do that? How do we do that in the most unfair way possible? And that is playing this on turn 3 for free. And so this is the true. I think that this is going to be the true best deck of the format in the end, because it just looked at the card pool, said, what's the most unfair thing we can do? How fast can we do it? And how can we exploit it the most? And I think the Stitch Rockstar as well is one of the most unfair things you can do in Lorcana, right? I can play this thing, I can shift it out on turn 3 if I have Lantern, turn 4, and then all my 1-drops just replace themselves. That's insane. So those two cards in combination, Ariel, also a very, very good card, are crazy. And Rapunzel, not very good against Ruby Amethyst, I'll be honest, but against everything else, Rapunzel's come down, draw 3 cards. So this list, it just kind of does it all, to be honest. And it has this list, definitely. Amber Steel, Wheel Steel, has a sequence of cards that it can play turn 1, 2, and 3 that is almost unbeatable. Like, if they the math on it is not great, but Captain Hook, Lantern, ink every card / play every card in my hand, shift Captain Hook out. Excuse me, sorry, I have a little bit of cough. And then play Whole New World. That is so wildly unfair and powerful. There's almost not many decks are going to be able to keep up with that draw specifically. That is a game-winning hand in Lorcana.
Yep, 100%.
All right,
gets me really excited for what we're going to talk about next, which is OP, more updates for competitive play in Lorcana. Moving into, let me pull up the tweet here, but I believe it's Q2 of 2024 is when they're slated to start. We're going to dive deeper into more official competitive events. Which is nice.
So tell us what they exactly read it out. Read out the exact quote of what they said in regards to organized play.
Let me pull it up now, my friend.
Because this is where the devil's going to be in the details with this one.
Yeah, one thing I actually want to note before is they did give us an update about reprints, which is going to be great for everyone all around the world, but particularly in the US, because I know stock is pretty low. It says the reprint of the first chapter boosters and starters is moved up and will begin shipping mid-November in North America. We hope that this reprint quantity will make the game more readily available. Our goal is for fans to have no difficulty finding product to get started. Okay, so moving on to the competitive stuff, we have... Next, we want to announce that starting in Q2 2024, we will have both official fan events and an official competitive circuit. Fan events will be a way for Disney fans to come together to share their love of Disney Lorcana, even if they may not necessarily play the game. That's whatever.
Wait, what does that mean?
Okay.
What does that? What does that mean? Actually,
is that? Do you think that's more so focused about how they were doing this whole pin system? Like, it was like, oh, dress up as your favorite Disney character and win a pin or whatever. I mean, that's fine for I guess they're trying to appeal to the true Disney fans, if that makes sense. But personally, I don't care about that at all.
Yeah, let us know in the comments below what you think that is, because that is an elusive statement to me. We want to create events for people to come to and enjoy. And did it say
even if they don't play the game? Yeah, it said even if they may not necessarily play the game.
Huh. Yeah, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just like, what could that possibly mean? Maybe. Okay, so if I'm going to put on my tinfoil hat, and if I'm going to be optimistic, hopefully that means events centered around that may be located in or somewhat near to the Disney parks or something like that.
I mean, I'd be kind of down for that, but it still says it's just a weird mix, right? I personally can't imagine your casual or even your hardcore Disney fan who has all the Mickey ears and all the bags and everything, just rocks up to this uber competitive I
don't think they would be competing. It'd be participation.
No, I agree, but trying to mash those things together would be very funny, right? Bringing those two groups of people together.
My favorite thing is that you just read that out and you're like, yeah, that's just of course, and you're just like, wait, what? And I was like, what is that mean?
What's Disney? To me, I'm kind of like, yeah, whatever. I'm like, they could do what they want, realistically.
Yeah.
All right.
I have no idea what that is. I'd love to hear from anybody listening what you think those events.
What you think it is?
What they mean by that? Because they intentionally wrote that. What are they alluding to?
Yeah. All right, next we have competitive events will be the premier place for Disney Lorcana TCG players to prove themselves. You can also expect exclusives for each of these types of events, and we will share more details in January 2024. So new year, we're going to have some more news. So they do also mention
let's pause so we can just break it down. So keywords being used here. Circuit. So circuit implies multiple tournaments. Circuit also implies tournaments that allow you to qualify for bigger tournaments. Circuit's a big word. It could be written by this could have been written by an intern. It could have been written by their content creation person that maybe just uses whatever words they think is interesting and exciting. But circuit is definitely a loaded word when it comes to competitive play, tournaments, etc. It means it's a one-off. It's not going to be a one-off. Circuit also implies they said what they said about the promos. I don't know if they said the word promo, but they're saying that you will be able to get promos.
Expect exclusives for each of these types of events.
Yeah. So basically promos to show up to the event. So hopefully it's not like One Piece TCG. One Piece TCG is a promo-based game, so they don't do cash prizes. It's just promos to top 8. That system can be extremely lucrative in the beginning, but it is a bit Ponzi-nomic, and it tends to go down over time consistently. That's happened in
Ponzi-nomic. Oh my god!
I think that's a word, Ponzi-nomics. I think that
breaking out the words today.
I could have just made that word up, but basically what I mean is that it can be very lucrative. You can sell promos for a lot of money in the beginning, but just as a game matures and more promos are introduced into the market, the inherent value of promos goes down as well, because promos are all based around exclusivity. So it's just an inherently flawed system in terms of compensating players. So I hope that they add, because it can be extremely lucrative. For instance, in Flesh and Blood, the first tournament that I top 8'd, the promo card that I got for top 8'ing, not winning the tournament, at one point was worth $50,000, $30,000 to $50,000. That's crazy, insane, man. Right? That was a $10,000 tournament. Nowadays, those promos are worth. Some of those promos are worth less than, like the winning ones can be like, maybe around 1,000, less than 1,000. The promos, the door prize promos can be like $50. It's just like as more promos come in and the market gets more saturated, it goes down. And Flesh and Blood is definitely not a promo based compensation game in terms of the pro circuit. It's $1 million pro circuit. There's $1 million cash every single year. But in terms of like something like One Piece, they are just promos. So hopefully Lorcana goes with the hybrid model of you show up to this event, there's participation promos, you get something exclusive, cool for showing up, and maybe they add top 8 promos, but they also put cash incentive at the top as well. Because for me, it's hard to take a TCG seriously that only does promos in terms of compensating players.
Yeah, definitely. They also note that while we have tournament guidelines and other policies live on the official Disney Lorcana site, we will provide regular updates as we align globally and take in feedback from our players to make competitive play the best experience we can. So I assume that means they're going to be doing revised stuff, probably like with the announcement in January of like, we have rules, but here's like, maybe judge program.
Yeah, they need a judge program. They absolutely need a judge program. They need a way to compensate judges. Unfortunately, I think that system is going to be created ad hoc. I don't think they were planning to launch with it, but there is tons of precedent in the TCG industry for them to look towards in terms of how to create a judge program, how to incentivize judges. It's very important. These events, like major events, competitive events, do not run without judges. Judges are some of them. They are key to events, and you have to find a system in which you can qualify them so that they can, run these tournaments and have integrity, but also so you can compensate them, because without them, none of these tournaments exist. So hopefully,
that's actually, sorry to interrupt you. That's actually a question as someone who hasn't really dived too deep into in-person competitive events like that. So for judges at events like this, say it's an official Disney Lorcana event, let's say it's the first one, are judges compensated? Please tell me they are.
So it depends. Usually they're compensated in product. Sometimes they're compensated on cash as well. It depends on the game. But a lot of times it's product based. But what games will do is they'll make I don't know about Magic. I'm talking about Flesh and Blood, and I know about a little bit about One Piece, and they will compensate the judges with product and exclusive promos. So they will be like literally just judge promos that you can only get from judging. And yeah, they can be quite lucrative at that, but they'll give a lot of product. Judging is definitely it is a selfless a more selfless thing to do. Like if you want to go to an event, judging is in general is going to be a minus EV thing to do. You're also going to work extremely hard. You'll be on your feet all day, and people will probably not treat you with as much respect as you deserve. That is just how it goes. Sure. That is the unfortunate side of judging, but that is why we are so appreciative of our judges in games, is because it is a very thankless job. That being said, Yeah, you'll mostly be minus EV slightly, or you'll break. Best case for most judging programs is that, and there's definitely different tiers. Like there are people that professionally judge games and fly across the world, and they get compensated differently, like the head judges. But judging in general is more like you want to go to the event, you want to be at the event, you want to be around your friends, you want to go out to this area, but you don't necessarily want to play and have to sort of go through like
it's a lot of commitment. It's actually probably more commitment than actually it is than showing up and playing, right?
Yeah,
you
it's
show
also,
up and play, you have fun, you do, but like as a judge, you're there
all
day.
It's a lot of responsibility too. Yeah, it's like it's key to the game. But ultimately, the value proposition of judging is that usually, I mean, the idea is that you're compensated enough that you can go to these events and at least break even. But I mean, you got to think about that, because sometimes you're breaking even for literally standing on your feet for 12 to 13 hours a day. And I'm going to be honest, like, I mean, I don't want to sit up here and say some virtue stuff, but I think I treat judges with as much respect as I possibly can, and you can hear how much reverence I have for them and how I speak about them. But I would, if you're looking at judging, not only will you be on your feet all day, but you'll definitely deal with players that won't treat you with as much respect as they probably should. I mean, judging is like most of the time when a judge is called, or not most of the time, but sometimes a judge is called, like it's a very stressful and controversial scenario. Like people are trying to resolve sort of nuanced rules of the game, and the game can sometimes hinge on that decision. So it's a tough job, bro. I would never do it. I would never judge. I would never do it. I thought about doing it a long time ago, but it's probably one of the hardest things you can do in TCGs. Yeah. But some people love it, and those are the people we need for these events to work out. So yeah, zooming back to Lorcana, they need a judge program, and they need one that not only a way for judges to progress, so level 1 judge, level 2 judge, level 3 judge, head judges, etc., but they also need a way to compensate them so that they're incentivized to go to these events.
Yeah, and then the last thing I want to touch on, it's really not that important, but they're changing promo cards a little bit. So they just said, lastly, we've recently announced a change to convention promos. Going forward, convention promos will no longer have the logo of the convention on them, but there will be 3 new cards available for each set with a promo icon in the rarity spot. So it looks like that it's basically the same promo icon that you get if you win them at your local. It's like the little, I don't know, I don't even know how to describe the symbol.
Yeah.
It's just like kind of two
triangles facing.
2 triangle
right.
things, yeah. So
yeah, no surprise. This is probably the plan the entire time. They're just clarifying it. The idea of that they were going to put like random con on there every time probably was. Yeah. They probably were never intending to do that, and there's like, okay, here we're clarifying this. All right, Kawa, I'm gonna ask you a question now. Competitive circuit starting Q2 2024. What does that look? What does that mean? What is a competitive circuit? How much money are they going to put up? What kind of tournaments are they going to be? What levels of tournaments? Is it going to be a world championship? They're going to be national championships? Where are these tournaments going to be located? Just tell me what goes through your mind as a person that maybe hasn't spent as much time in that sort of, I don't know, world quite yet. The paper TCG con world and tournament world.
Sure. It gets me excited. I have to say that with the popularity of the game at the moment, like, I think the game is very popular, but it's also maybe a little bit hard to judge based on there was very little product to give out at the start anyways, right? So like you're trying to judge, okay, how popular is the game really? If there was, let's say there was like endless stock or whatever, okay, how much actually gets sold, how many players are like really interested in playing competitively and stuff like that. Although for the most part, I do think that players who want to play this game competitively have found their way to get product, right? I feel like that's going to be the case for if they want to actually play the game, they will pay the price or they will get the cards or whatever. But I'm hoping that with the popularity that we've seen of the game so far, that it does take off. In terms of pricing support or like where these events are, like you're asking me, but like obviously you would have the experience, right? Like I'm sure you're going to tell me like there's probably been games that like I assume there have been games that have absolutely fucked up the start of their competitive.
Most games,
yeah, most games. Okay, so this is probably what you're asking me. It's like, what do I expect compared? I will put my expectations very low, because I mean, why try and be like, oh my god, there's going to be $1 million circuit on things. Although it is Disney, so like I would hope there's a lot of money, but then it's like, how much money are they actually going to commit to?
Is it Disney or is it Ravensburger? I don't even know in terms of like who puts up.
Well, I have no idea for funding. I'm just saying because
I want to clarify though that they're actually. I'm not looking for you to give me the right answer. I'm just actually interested to hear what goes through your head or what goes through your mind when you read that, because they were not specific.
I would assume. Okay, let's just say it starts in Q2 2024. Let's say there's a few tournaments. I mean, for me, I would love. I don't know if I should say I would expect it, but I would love like a big tournament at the end of the year. I would love that type of thing, right? So like they do a few qualifiers, leads up to a big tournament towards the end of the year, maybe the start of the new year. I think I would be quite happy with that if there's just regionals, and then I guess nationals, and then worlds. I think that would be interesting. But yeah, now I want to know your take. I'm really curious.
Honestly, I don't know. It's can mean so many different things with what they said, and I think that they worded it that way to keep it very open ended.
Of course.
My hope is that they contract with a company like SCG or Channel Fireball. So SCG and Channel Fireball. So like the SCG was hosting the Flesh and Blood tournament this weekend, but SCG has changed, and maybe they've been like this for a while. Magic players listening could correct me, but they've changed to a model where SCG now has a Magic tournament, a Flesh and Blood tournament, and whatever card game wants to be there, it seems like in that convention. So this weekend was Flesh and Blood, it was Magic, but it was also My Hero Academia, which is a game I have no knowledge about, had a big tournament there. So I could easily see a slot in with Disney Lorcana. SCG, I mean, SCG is an interesting company. So if SCG writes any content about Lorcana on their website, it leads me to think that they are talking to them. Because SCG has done a little bit with Fab, and I don't know, I have a bit of insider knowledge on Flesh and Blood and their relationship with SCG, just as a result of talking to Legendary Studio, whatever. It leads me to think they've been talking, and that would be the easiest thing. What SCG offers to a company like Ravensburger is one-stop shop, packaged up. We will put you in our tournament circuit, and we will make it all happen. Like they can do basically one-click coverage. Like SCG can do coverage for them. It's very expensive, and they can run the tournament. SCG is fantastic at running tournaments. If we're able to provide judges through a judge program, like it is just the modern way TCG tournaments work. And I would not be surprised to see Ravensburger do a deal with something like SCG and see those tournaments at these sort of SCG cons, I guess, which is, it's called the different things. Like this weekend for Flesh and Blood, the Flesh and Blood calling Dallas Fort Worth. For Magic, it was, I don't even know what they called it. The Magic, I don't know, standard maybe. I can't even remember what tournament, but yeah, like a 10K or a 20K. And then there was also My Hero Academia tournament. Looks like SCG is expanding into a company that will be able to host multiple card games under this sort of umbrella, because these contracts that they do with the convention centers, I believe, and I have a little bit of knowledge, so caveat, just forewarning, could be talking slightly out of mass. The contracts that they do with the convention centers, they're like multi-year contracts. So they that's why you always see SCG and so or CFB, they're always in the same sort of area. And what I understand is when they make those deals with those convention centers, that they're multi-year deals. But anyway, that's what I see. I want to say that I know a lot of people, a lot of competitive card game players that have specifically not played Lorcana and not given it the time of day because it didn't have a competitive circuit. And I know there's people listening to this and be like, we don't want those people in our game anyway. Well, they're not bad people. I'll tell you that. But, a TCG coming out in 2023, 2024, when there's a million games coming out without competitive play, is pretty hard to take seriously. Mm-hmm. And I think now that Ravensburg is showing that they have a desire to do a competitive circuit, there's going to be a lot more players coming in, because it was a double whammy, right? Basically, they came out and they said, hey, there's basically no future for this game. It's always going to be casual. There's no competitive scene. And then it was also $1,000 to $2,000 to buy in. So it was a pretty hard sell, to be honest. Like you had to basically just sell on gameplay. So with both of those things being fixed, one with reprints and the other with a competitive circuit, you're going to see a lot more players, and especially a lot more competitive players that like going to tournaments coming into Disney Lorcana, which I think is only a good thing.
Yep, I have to agree with you there 100%.
Sweet. Well, we're gonna save spoilers for next week. We'll We'll try to get a guest. We'll see if we can get Kawa on a nice card. Get him on.
Oh man, this again. I was telling Sasha this is your favorite thing to do. I want to get you on a card once. Yeah, I gotta get you on a card. I gotta like, Brennan, what do you think? I gotta get you to actually. I want to hold you to what you said, which will probably be true. But anyways, you said in a year from now, Whole New World will be banned in Lorcana. I'm gonna mark down the date.
Most likely card to be banned. It would be so far with all the cards that exist in Lorcana. I would put my money to be the first card banned. I think it's the most likely to be banned.
Fair.
What? I gotta think of what is the card that Kawa thinks would be banned out of Chapter 1?
I don't know. I'd probably agree with you. I don't think it's a bad statement. I just think it'll be. I just want to hold you to something and then you'd be wrong. That's all.
Yeah.
It makes sense, right? I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you said, right? I think it is the most broken thing you can do in the game at the moment, so it makes sense for it to be the thing that's shut down. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had a tangent. I was thinking about lists right when you said that. I just want to note that a lot of these Ruby Amethyst lists, they were not. They were running one cauldron or 0 cauldrons, which is really interesting because I know Moyne and I were talking about, like, is cauldron so powerful that you need to put multiple in? Obviously, it's a redundant card. You don't want to on the battlefield, but the idea is after you get the first one, you always opt the second one to the bottom. I know some players have been experimenting with that, but we didn't see it sort of percolate to the top. Just something to note because it's there's definitely a dichotomy of ideas when it comes to cauldron or no cauldron. So cool to see that. Anyway, big week of news, huge week for Lorcana, to be honest. It's awesome to see. I'm super happy the grassroots tournament scene has been flourishing. If you went to Miami, if you competed in any of these tournaments, let us know. Please. Yeah, let us know. Let us know how your experience was, how the tournament is run, etc. Honestly, we'd just love to hear anything about the weekend. And then, yeah, boom, Ravensburger is Disney, whatever you want to call them, Lorcana. Looks like they want to compete. Looks like they want to compete in the modern TCG market. Lorcana was initially pitched as this very casual game. It's in big box retailers, no OP, none of that, like, and then the league system. But looks like, as we head into 2024, they're like, boom, we're doing a circuit. We're getting reprints out. We're going to get cards to people, and who knows? I think that Lorcana, due to its rule set, due to its intellectual property, and how analog it is to a game like Magic the Gathering, has a lot of potential in the competitive scene for mass adoption to compete with those big three, which is Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, and Magic the Gathering. So exciting 2024 to come. Anything to close out with for the week, Kawa?
I just want to say, really excited leading up to Floodborn. A lot of new cards, like Brandon said, we'll probably cover a lot of them next week. Let us know down below what's been your favorite card that's been spoiled so far, because I would love to discuss that on next week's episode. And then the final thing I want to talk about is myself and Raven. We actually just dropped our finals for our Cusco Cup. We've been experimenting, trying to do kind of like what would casting Lorcana look like on Pixelborn. So give that a look if you want. It was only 4-player tournament, but it was pretty interesting.
Who ended up winning? Was it Spessy?
Do you have to wait? You have to watch the video.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Sorry. That was like the worst question possible. It's like, hey, go check out this video. Hey, can you spoil it for us?
Who wins? Yeah. It was fun though. It was fun.
Yeah, keen to see the list. All right. For Twitter's Brennan APG at KawaTech_CG. Video version of this at youtube@youtube.com /Podcana. Like I said, everything you need is in the description below. Check it out. Wasn't able to get deck images because these are not in Dreamboard quite yet. So just check out these articles. They're very robust. They have everything you need to sort of follow along. And until next week, we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you all so much for listening.